first question, and each candidate will get 2 minutes to answer this question, and we'll start with Todd. What will you advocate to adequately and fairly fund Ohio's public schools?
Could you repeat the question for those that are...
What will you advocate to adequately and fairly fund Ohio's public schools?
Thank you. As we all know, we have an unconstitutional funding system in Ohio that has been declared unconstitutional 4 times. Unfortunately, the people in charge now, the Republicans, including Nan Baker, think that everything is fine. So nothing is going to change on their watch. The Supreme Court has refused to hear this case. But we have serious problems in our public schools. Right now, 65% of our public schools project a budget gap moving forward. Between 5 and 10% of those schools are looking at serious financial problems, which may result in many of them being in fiscal caution or fiscal emergency. To fix our school funding problem, we need to move forward to reach out for solutions that involve other than local property taxes. The evidence-based model that Governor Strickland put forth had us going in the right direction. We were starting to use more state funding and less local funding. I heard Nan Baker say recently that we don't have a problem with state funding because all of our schools are funded equally. And anybody who has looked at the numbers know that couldn't be further from the truth. We spend $15,000 to $25,000 in some districts and $5,000 or $6,000 in other districts. You know, we're not going to fix the school funding problem until we have a serious conversation about what is the cost to provide an excellent education to every child, and then we need to look at all sources of revenue so that we can bring those funds to our school districts without relying on our local property taxes exclusively. Thank you.
You need a question, too?
No, that's okay. Yeah, no. What we need to do first is right now we have a ridiculous budget that has had horrible ramifications to our local district. We've seen that Rocky River, under the original budget plan, was set to lose 80% of its school funding, and Westlake a similar number. Obviously, we can't solve the underlying problem of property taxes as long as we're drastically slashing the funding that the local schools are receiving through the state budget. We need to stop this reckless spending on the part of the Kasich administration through things like these ridiculous tax credits. Like, for instance, you know that you get a tax credit often, or actually always, for donations to state representative campaigns. Well, that's great for Todd and myself as political candidates to pitch donations for us. It's not necessarily good policy. You lose often millions of dollars a year in revenue. That's something that we should get rid of. There's other tax credits rather from the Kasich administration and that have been in the budget for many years now that should be excised. We can use the savings that we would save through that to help fund our schools, to help ensure that they're not solely reliant on property taxes. So that's the #1 issue. Before we deal with anything else, we need to stop this drain of public funds from the state government.
Second question, what can and should be done in the state legislature to combat the foreclosure crisis in Ohio?
Thanks. That's actually an issue that I have a lot of passion and a lot of experience with. I was a building and housing code prosecutor for years, and now I concentrate my practice mostly in that field. I have a lot of ideas on that front, but I think one of the things you see is, as the foreclosure crisis spreads, you see banks that will institute a foreclosure action and then do nothing to take the property back. They'll institute an action. The person will leave. The property will become a blight, a nuisance to its community. It'll become a hazard. It'll attract a crime and negative elements to the area. And the cities and local governments are left holding the bag because the person who left doesn't have the financial means to take care of it or anything, and the bank doesn't own it. What I would do, one of the things that I want to push is to have a mechanism whereby the bank needs to move forward and actually complete the sheriff's sale, take the property back, or another entity take the property back within a certain frame of time. If that is not done, then they need to surrender their property interest or have some mechanism whereby the government is not left holding the bag with thousands of dollars worth of demolition or board-up costs. That way we can hold the financial industry's feet to the fire a little bit and make them be equal partners in the crisis that is really largely an engine of their own doing. So that would be my first priority. I have some other ideas too, but certainly that would be priority number one, and that way we can really help make sure that we always have responsible owners with the property and that the crisis is more contained than currently it is.
Again, this is another one of those issues I think that Andy and I definitely agree on. The foreclosure crisis is a big problem in Ohio. 1 in 60 homes in this state are in foreclosure. 1 in 3 people in our state are underwater in their mortgage, and nearly 1 in 6 are behind and in the process at a threat to get foreclosed. The federal government recently, Ohio was part, as you may know, of a large settlement, and I think that the money, $335 million, are coming to Ohio to deal with some of the repercussions of this crisis. And I support most of the things that I've read they're going to be doing with that money. I think that we need to give direct relief to people who've been affected by whether they've lost their homes or whether they have loan modifications that need to be made. We need to give that money directly to the people that have been victimized by this crisis, not count on the banks to take care of it. We need to take care of the people who've been victims of lender abuse and have already lost their home. We need to find a way to get them into stable housing. We need to give a way for people to refinance. When I was on the campaign trail, early in my days out there in the cold, I stopped at a house in Westlake, and the lady came. She wasn't home. She pulled in behind me, and she said, "What are you doing here?" I said, I'm not selling anything. I'm just here to just." Oh, she said, "I thought you were from the bank." She said, "I'm afraid I'm losing my home, and I thought you were from Chase because I'm afraid I'm going to lose my home any day." These are real problems in this district. And just because, you know, we're lucky, but we're not that lucky. We're all affected by this. We need land banks. We need money for revitalization. There's a lot of things that need to be done in this foreclosure crisis. And I think that Andy and I both would probably agree that it's important to us because I know as a homeowner, my biggest fear, like all of you, you know, what do? Your home is your safety net. It's where you raise your family. And we've got to protect people and help them keep their homes. Thank you.
Actually, could I just, it's not really a rebuttal, just a follow-up a little bit real quick. And a lot of the things Todd said absolutely are great. The money coming in, though, I just want to point out a lot of this money, the land bank programs are such a great tool for future use, and Jim Rokakis is doing a fantastic job of popping these up throughout the state now. But right now, a lot of that money is all money that's being used to mop up the foreclosure crisis, and it's being used where banks currently aren't footing any of that bill. So I really want to see that the banks hold their feet to the fire a little bit and make sure that it's not the government, that not the federal government, not the state government, not the local municipalities who have to foot this entire bill. It shouldn't be the taxpayers' burden. The banks brought us into this mess. We should make sure that they are equal partners in paying to rectify it.
Any further comments? All right, the next question says, will you try to stop the Kasich agenda for increased privatization of our state assets like the Ohio Turnpike? And I would add to that, if your answer is yes, how?
You had to make it hard, didn't you? Yes, absolutely. I've stopped the privatization agenda. I'm a public school teacher in Cleveland, and I have seen firsthand the agenda of privatization. I believe that private school, for-profit charter schools, and the attack on collective bargaining statewide is definitely the first step toward privatization, because if workers are united and workers have a voice in the workplace and collective bargaining, we will not let them privatize our resources and our jobs and our services. People know in this state and in this room that you cannot get quality service when you sell it out to the lowest bidder. You cannot do our turnpike to the lowest bidder. You cannot do our schools to the lowest bidder. You cannot do our natural resources to the lowest bidder. Because what happens when things go wrong is we don't have the opportunity with public schools. We don't get a second chance to raise our children. We don't get a second chance to keep that lake clean. We don't get a second chance at safety on the highway. We can't file bankruptcy and start over. We need there are certain public services that people value. And I think the way to stop the Kasich agenda is to take back the State House for Democrats who will stand up for the workers and the public services that we value.
Probably yet another issue that Todd and I will agree on. Certainly, you look at what other states have done, Indiana with their turnpike and the Pennsylvania prison system, they've had atrocious results. Indiana, it's been a failed experiment as far as privatizing their turnpike. And in Pennsylvania, it's been rife with corruption. We can't allow that here. We need vocal leaders to point out what's happened in other states, to keep the media spotlight on these failed experiments in other states and say, hey, no, this is not going to happen in Ohio. We've tried this in other places. They've failed. And we're going to keep the pressure on the Kasich administration. We're going to take back the House. And once we take back the House, they'll be a little bit impeded in cramming this stuff down our throat. So that's certainly, we need to stop this. And I think taking back the House and keeping the media spotlight on the failed experiments in other states is the #1 way to do it.
Andy and I agree on a lot, and I said we'd agree on a lot, but I have to say that as much as I thank the Plain Dealer for their endorsement, I'm not counting on the Plain Dealer or the media to shine the spotlight on, because I don't think the media really cares too much about the working class and the middle class as much as we'd like to think they do. I think that it's going to take workers standing up. It's going to take every one of us who knows a teacher, who knows somebody who works in a prison or on the turnpike. I think it's going to have to be grassroots from the workers who are affected most. But you never know.
Yeah. You're next.
I'll go next.
What is your view of the current administration's program of increasing the number of charter school vouchers from 13,000 to 30,000 this year and to 60,000 next year? Should tax dollars be used to fund vouchers?
Absolutely not. I mean, this is another example of the scope of the radicalism of the Kasich administration. Like I was saying earlier, it's not going to be one issue. It's going to be a whole lot of issues. And when you look at the scope of what the Kasich administration has been trying to push down our throats, it's kind of breathtaking. We've got probably the most radical administration in the entire country pushing this radical agenda down our throats. And it's time for it to stop. We need active leaders. We need leaders who will go to the media when they're listening, go speak in the club, speak everywhere, speak out against this, and put the spotlight. Again, use comparative states. Look at what other states have done, and you'll see that really this has been one of the most radical administrations in the entire country, and that's unacceptable for Ohio. Ohio is not an ideologue state. We need to combat this. I will combat this. I will defeat Nan Baker in the general election, and then I will work actively to stop extreme issues like the voucher plan that the Kasich administration has been pushing.
I love this question because to me this question illustrates why you need a teacher in the State House. I'd like you to read the question again, Steve.
Okay. What is your view with regard to the current administration's program of increasing the number of charter school vouchers from 13,000 to 30,000 this year and to 60,000 next year?
Okay, and I knew what the question was, but I wanted it read again because the question is incorrectly phrased. Because the governor did not increase the number of charter school vouchers, because charter schools and vouchers are two separate issues. Now, if we're talking about vouchers, I can talk about vouchers. If we're talking about charter schools, and I'm not trying to embarrass anyone or to, but I'm just saying the issues around education are that important, yet we're talking about it before we know what we're talking about. Are we talking about vouchers or we're talking about charter schools? And I'll give you my views on both, just so I cover it. Vouchers were sold to this state. They were actually an experiment in Cleveland when I started teaching, to take public funds, give them to parochial and other private schools, and the idea was that you were going to give opportunities to kids who were in failing schools. So they started in Milwaukee, they started in Cleveland, they started in places like Detroit, and they started in places like up there in Michigan and Flint. And then all these places where they started these vouchers had one thing in common, and that was they had minority children living in poverty without a voice. Nobody asked for these vouchers. And when they looked at it 10 years later, when they did the study in Milwaukee, they found that these vouchers were not giving opportunities to any new students. They were subsidizing students who had already been attending parochial schools, who never attended a public school in their life. Vouchers in this district will not provide new opportunities for our children. Vouchers will subsidize the families who choose to send their kids to St. Ignatius and St. Anne's. And those are all excellent schools. But the idea that vouchers provide new opportunities for kids in failing schools is a false statement. It's just not true in practice. And then now to charter schools. Charter schools are a whole other entity. Charter schools are publicly run, privately run. Many of them are for-profit in Ohio. Charter schools in this state, the charter school law was drafted by David Brennan, owner of Whitehead Management, who runs the most atrocious failing schools in the district in the state of Ohio. David Brennan finally, next week, will have to release his financial data for his charter schools. And our charter schools perform worse than our public schools. They bought their way out of accountability, and it's time to close the ones that are failing. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we all understood that we were talking about the David Brennan run charter schools. We need a representative that is going to be the best representative for the district. We don't need a teacher, we don't need a lawyer, we don't need any particular agenda or background. We need somebody who's going to argue passionately for us. We need someone who's going to argue enthusiastically for us. We have an out-of-control governor who's pushed his particular brand of for-profit charter schools. Not, there are charter schools that are very good institutions, but this particular governor has been focusing on the for-profit charter schools, and those charter schools are things that illustrate his extremism as a governor and the fact that he is an ideologue. We need to stop that. We need a representative that will speak out on all issues that face our district. I'll be that representative.
So, Bill, Steve, can you repeat the numbers again? Just the number. How many?
The numbers were 13,000 to 30,000 this year.
Yeah, we're talking about vouchers, okay? We're not talking about charter schools, we're talking about vouchers. And it's very important because you will not see charter schools in Westlake. You won't even see this happening. We're talking about vouchers. Vouchers that take money from our public schools to subsidize children that are already attending private schools. It's nothing to do with David Brennan. It's not about, it's a quiet, secret little program where all of a sudden the money that comes from the state is reduced because the voucher program is expanded and kids, and I say choose to send your children where you like. My children attend public schools, but if somebody doesn't want to send their kids to public schools, I understand that and I support you, but I don't want to pay for that. I pay for my kids' schooling if they go to Harvard. If you all want to help pay for that, that'll be your choice. But vouchers do not improve our public schools. They do not improve options for kids. We're talking about vouchers, and if we're going to have education as the big issue, we need to make sure we understand the difference. Thank you.
Todd, you're first this time. If the Republicans continue to be in control of the House, what could you do as a freshman Democrat to advance the interests of your constituents and your legislative agenda?
I would answer this question by telling you a little bit about me. I'm a union steward. I'm a union rep in my building. And as you know, I teach in Cleveland. As you may know, Cleveland is where all great experiments start. And we have a innovative schools model. And I teach at a career tech high school, Max Hayes Career Technical High School. And as the union rep, this past year, I was able to, we still have a contract, we still have collective bargaining, but our school wanted to go innovative. So as the union rep, I sat down with the CEO of the Cleveland schools, leaders of the Gunn Foundation and the Cleveland Foundation, and we got together with the teachers and partners in the business community, and we developed an innovative school model that would have flexibility within the collective bargaining agreement to change the working conditions that benefit teachers and benefit kids, and bring business partners into the school so that our kids get real career technical opportunities while they're still in high school. And we did all this without a strike, without a work stoppage, without any kind of conflict, because we sat down and we said, we're not leaving this room until we find something that we can all work on. Because they didn't think that you could do an innovative school with a union. And we didn't think, some of us didn't think, that we could have collective bargaining and be talking to the Cleveland Foundation. But I'm a consensus builder, I'm a practical person, and I think that Democrats, Republicans, Independents, no matter where we are, we can find things that we agree on. And we have to start by going into these discussions with the idea that we're not going to leave the room until we can find something that we can agree on, and then we can start there. Thank you.
I agree that this is how you go about trying to work with an often unreasonable side. As I've said in the past, I've been a prosecutor in the past and a private sector attorney. We've in both fields, I've done some things that I'm very proud of, leading innovative things in building and housing code issues, bringing together, basically, they're called comprehensive plea agreements, where we bring an owner who owns a lot of properties to the table. We cite them, when I was a prosecutor, we cited them criminally. We brought them to the table and got them to work out, and instead of a trial, instead of going to the mat with it, we let them know what the potential fines that they would be facing, what kind of evidence we had, and we worked out something that benefited, in this case, Cleveland. We worked out an agreement where they would pay a fine, but they would keep up the rest of their property. In fact, in one case, the corporation in question demolished about a dozen properties that they owned, saving a dozen deteriorated properties that they own, saving the city of Cleveland hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially in demo costs, and having to go through the criminal process again and again, or chase down new property owners. So this is the type of innovative program that I sought out when I was a prosecutor, and I was able to do that through working with the other side, through working with an often unreasonable side. You don't know unreasonable until you sometimes meet with a bank litigator. Although there are great litigators, don't get me wrong, who are working for banks. But this is what we need to do, and I think I have the background that can definitely bring that to the table.
Other than Senate Bill 5, what is the #1 failure by Representative Nan Baker? How will you use this to defeat her?
I really couldn't put it at #1. Like I said, when you talk to people of the district, there's so many different concerns they have. Certainly, I think school funding is high up there. Originally, she was for the school funding cuts before she was against it. Originally under the original plan, you had Rocky River and Westlake taking near 80% cuts. Once her feet were held to the fire a little bit, she changed her tune. But she still voted for that bill, and the local school district still suffered quite a bit. I think that is going to be a very important issue. I think she's been mostly a blind ideologue, a rubber stamp to the extremism of the Kasich administration. You see issues like fracking. That comes up a lot when I'm talking with people. People are concerned about fracking. They're concerned about what that's going to mean to their water, to their quality of life. They're concerned about what it's going to mean to the stability of their property, potentially. And you look across the scope of these issues, and Nan Baker has been a rubber stamp on almost all issues. I think the only thing she voted against the administration on was guns and bars, so that tells you where she's at. I think they're all going to play a role, and I think we need a candidate who can spotlight the attention on each of these failings of her leadership and show that, hey, she has been a partisan rubber stamp. We need someone who's independent. We need somebody who is going to be an active and independent leader for our district and not beholden to her party's narrow interest.
Yeah, we agree, but we don't agree about, I got to say, the Senate Bill 5 thing. We don't want to lose an opportunity when we have one, because Nan Baker, as much as it breaks my heart to admit it, she's a tough politician to beat, and she won this seat by, I think, about 20 points in a year when Democrats did pretty good. So, is she vulnerable? Yes, she's vulnerable, and she is vulnerable on more than Senate Bill 5. I think Andy covered most of them, but I would say she's been a supporter of an extreme agenda against women's rights, against women's reproductive rights and privacy rights. But the big thing that I would ask her is, what have you brought to this district? What have you done down in Columbus? What legislation have you introduced that has benefited this district? Because I heard something the other day, something like, for every dollar that this district sends to Columbus, we get about 9 cents back. And you know, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of like tired of subsidizing the rest of the state, because there are representatives around this state that bring projects into their district. They bring infrastructure, they bring jobs and opportunities, and we're blessed that we have a strong economy in this district. We benefit from being a suburb of Cleveland without having the inner ring problem. But this district is not getting service from Columbus, and it's clear. I'd like to know, you know, it's nice to introduce bills that name a highway after somebody, or those ones that everybody votes on 98-1, but I'd like to say, what have you done for us lately? Because I know that when we had Jennifer Brady in office, she was able to tell us, this is what I brought to this district, this is the money, and these are the projects. Here in our district, we build a beautiful library, and we have to pay local taxes more to pay for our beautiful Westlake Porter Public Library, because she voted to cut the taxes coming to our libraries. And it goes on and on. So I got a nice list of things that Nan is going to answer for in November, and I can't wait to hear those answers. So, thank you.
And actually, Todd said something that I think really points out why we need a great campaigner to be the Democrat for this seat. Todd mentioned that Nan won by 20 points in a good year for Democrats. That's actually not accurate. She won very narrowly by about 2 percentage points in a good year for Democrats. She won by a little less than 20 points in a very bad year for Democrats. We really need a candidate who can understand what it takes to win in a race like this. I've been helping, volunteering, leading so many different campaigns. I understand what it takes to win in a race like this, and what it's going to take to win is someone who's able to make the personal contact that we've never seen in this district before. We need someone who's able to make 10,000 phone calls, to knock on 2,000 doors in a month. And it's only through that sustained personal contact, through putting your heart and soul into a campaign like that we're going to be able to personalize politics to the extent that, coupled with her numerous policy vulnerabilities, we can defeat her and take the seat back.